If you asked me a month ago, I would have said our marriage was solid, maybe not perfect, but strong enough to weather any storm. Dakota and I had been together for 12 years, married for 9. We had 2 beautiful daughters, Emma, 8, and Lily, 5. Life wasn't always easy, but we made it work. At least, that's what I thought. Looking back, the signs had been there. The late-night texting, the sudden interest in skiing, something she'd never cared about before, and the way her smile no longer reached her eyes when she looked at me. But I brushed it off. We were just going through a rough patch. The trip to the mountains was supposed to fix things. A week away from the noise of everyday life, just us and the snow-covered slopes. I booked the cabin, packed the car, and told myself that this would be the reset button we needed. The first few days were picture perfect. The girls built snowmen in the front yard, their laughter echoing through the trees. We skied as a family during the day and huddled by the fireplace at night, sipping cocoa and playing board games. Dakota seemed happier than she had in months. Lighter, freer. At first, I thought it was the fresh air and change of scenery. But then I noticed the way her gaze lingered when we passed the ski lodge, the way her phone seemed to vibrate more often than usual, and the way she disappeared for long stretches of time, always with the excuse of needing a break or getting some solo ski time. Still, I pushed the doubts aside. After all, we were here to reconnect, to remember why we fell in love in the first place. But what I didn't know was that while I was trying to hold us together, Dakota was busy tearing us apart, and soon, I would discover the truth. The third day of our trip began like any other: cold air, snow-covered trees, and the distant hum of the ski lifts carrying people up the slopes. Emma and Lily were bundled up in their colorful winter jackets, their cheeks rosy from the chill, giggling as they helped each other into their skis. Dakota stood a few feet away, her phone in hand as she tapped out a message. She'd been glued to that thing more than usual lately, but I chalked it up to work. She'd mentioned a few last-minute emails before we left home, ready to hit the slopes. I asked, strapping on my skis. She glanced up, slipping her phone into her pocket with a quick smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Actually, I think I'll ski solo for a bit. You take the girls. I just need a little time to myself. I frowned. You sure? It'd be nice to ski as a family. Grant, it's fine, she said with a touch of impatience. I'll meet you guys for lunch at the lodge, okay? Without waiting for my response, she adjusted her goggles and pushed off down the slope, disappearing into the crowd of skiers. Emma tugged at my sleeve. Daddy, come on. I want to go down the big hill. Forcing a smile, I focused on my daughters. All right, let's do it. The morning passed in a blur of laughter and snowflakes. I helped Emma and Lily navigate the slopes, their excitement infectious as they conquered each new hill. But beneath the joy, an uneasy feeling gnawed at my chest. Where was Dakota? By noon, we made our way to the lodge for lunch. The warm air inside was a welcome contrast to the biting cold outside. Families crowded around wooden tables, sipping hot chocolate and sharing stories of their morning adventures, but Dakota was nowhere to be seen. I pulled out my phone and sent her a quick text. Where are you? We're at the lodge. Minutes passed with no response. I tried to shake off the worry, distracting myself by helping the girls with their sandwiches. But my gaze kept drifting to the entrance, hoping to see her walk through the door. Finally, after nearly 30 minutes, she appeared, cheeks flushed, snowflakes clinging to her hair. Hey, sorry I'm late, she said, brushing snow from her coat. Got a little carried away on the slopes. I forced a smile. Everything okay? Of course. The snow's perfect today. She leaned down to kiss Emma and Lily, her smile bright and carefree. But when her eyes met mine, I saw something flicker in their depths, something she was trying to hide. After lunch, we skied as a family, but the tension between us lingered. Dakota stayed close, but her laughter felt forced, her gaze distant. She kept glancing toward the ski lifts, her fingers brushing her phone through the pocket of her jacket as if waiting for a message. That night, after putting the girls to bed, I found her standing by the fireplace, staring into the flames with a distant expression. I approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. You've been a little distant lately. Everything all right? She tensed beneath my touch, her smile appearing a beat too late. I'm fine, Grant. It's just, I needed this trip more than I realized. The fresh air, the time to myself, it's helping. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, but something wasn't right. The next morning, as we prepared for another day on the slopes, I noticed a man watching Dakota from across the lodge. He stood near the ski rental counter, tall and athletic, with a rugged charm that seemed to belong on the mountains. His eyes flicked toward Dakota more than once, and though she pretended not to notice, the slight flush on her cheeks told me otherwise. Who's that? I asked casually, nodding toward the man. Dakota glanced over, her expression carefully neutral. Oh, that's Chase. He's one of the ski instructors here. I took a quick lesson with him yesterday just to brush up on my technique. My pulse quickened. Since when do you need lessons? It's been a while since I skied, Grant. Don't make a big deal out of it. She adjusted her scarf and turned away, leaving me standing there with a knot of unease tightening in my chest that I tried to push the thoughts aside as we hit the slopes, focusing on the girls and the crisp mountain air. But every time Dakota drifted ahead or lingered behind, my gaze found its way to Chase, the way he moved down the slopes with effortless grace, the way his eyes seemed to follow my wife whenever she passed. By the time we returned to the cabin that evening, the tension between Dakota and me had reached a breaking point. You've been acting strange ever since we got here, I said, setting down my skis. Is there something you're not telling me? She sighed, rubbing her hands together as if trying to warm them. Grant, you're imagining things. I just needed some space to clear my head. Can't you just let me enjoy this trip without turning it into something it's not? I wanted to believe her. I really did, but deep down, I knew the truth was buried beneath the snow waiting to be uncovered. By the fourth day, the knot in my chest had grown tighter. The mountain air no longer felt crisp and refreshing, it felt suffocating. Every time I glanced at Dakota, I caught glimpses of something just beneath the surface, secrets she wasn't telling me. Her phone buzzed more often now. Quick glances, fingers typing fast, then the screen flipping down onto the table before I could see. I told myself I was imagining things, reading too much into the coincidence of her sudden passion for skiing and the ski instructor who seemed to show up whenever she was around, but the doubt wouldn't go away. That afternoon, while Dakota took the girls sledding near the lodge, I stayed back to rest, though rest was the last thing on my mind. I waited until I heard the front door close and the sound of snow crunching beneath their boots faded into the distance. Then, I moved. Dakota's phone was charging on the kitchen counter. My hands hesitated for a moment, fingers hovering above the screen. I had never crossed this line before, never violated her privacy, but this wasn't about trust anymore, this was about the truth. I pressed the side button, and the screen lit up locked. Of course. But I remembered the pattern. She used muscle memory from glancing at her swipe it open over the years. I tried once, denied. Twice, still wrong. On the third try, the screen unlocked. My pulse pounded as I scrolled through her apps. I opened her messages, nothing unusual. A few texts from her sister, some from her friends, and one from her boss. Then I noticed something. A messaging app one didn't recognize hidden among the others, like it belonged there. I tapped it. The app opened, and rows of messages appeared, most from names I didn't recognize. But one name stood out, Chase. I clicked at first. The messages were innocent. Conversations about skiing techniques, weather conditions, and scheduling lessons. But as I scrolled further, the tone shifted. Chase, you looked amazing today. Could barely focus on the lesson. Dakota, you're terrible. What if my husband catches us talking like this? Chase, then we'll just have to be more careful, won't we? Meet me after the lifts close? Same place as yesterday? I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling as I scrolled faster. Dakota, you're impossible. But, maybe. I can sneak away after the girls go to bed. Chase, I'll be waiting. I still remember how you felt against me last night. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight I thought I might be sick. The phone felt heavy in my hand, like it was soaked in poison. My mind raced, each message flashing in front of my eyes as if the screen had burned them into my memory. There was no room for doubt now. Dakota was cheating on me, and not just cheating, sneaking away while our daughters slept just feet away. The last message caught my eye. Chase, see you tonight. The cabin by the west slope. You know the one. The west slope. The farthest side of the resort, the one with the fewest cabins, nestled among dense pines, away from prying eyes. I clenched my jaw, my breath coming fast and uneven. That I needed to see it for myself. That I needed proof. That night, after dinner, Dakota claimed she was tired and went to bed early. The girls and I stayed up by the fire, reading stories and sipping hot cocoa. But my mind was miles away, already picturing her slipping out into the snow-covered night. By 10:30 p.m., Emma and Lily had fallen asleep. I waited until the cabin was silent, every creak of the wood and whistle of the wind sharpening my focus. Then I heard it, the faint creak of the bedroom door, the soft pad of footsteps across the wooden floor. I stood by the window, hidden behind the curtain, and watched as Dakota stepped outside, pulling her coat tightly around her. She glanced back at the cabin once, then disappeared into the darkness. My breath misted against the cold glass as I stood frozen in place. Part of me wanted to rush after her, to confront her right then and there. But the other part, the part that needed certainty, held me back. I waited a full 5 minutes, letting her get ahead, then grabbed my coat and boots. The snow crunched beneath my feet as I followed her tracks through the forest. The moon hung low, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground. My breath came in clouds of frost as I moved, my eyes scanning the dark trees ahead. Branches whispered in the wind, and somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of laughter echoed from the main lodge. But out here, away from the lights and warmth of the resort, the world felt cold and hollow. The tracks led deeper into the woods, curving toward the west slope just as Chase's message had said. My pulse quickened with each step, my breath sharp and ragged in the frigid air. Then, through the trees, I saw it. A small cabin, half hidden among the snow-laden branches. Smoke curled from the chimney, faint light flickering behind the frosted windows. I slowed my pace, heart hammering as I approached the cabin. The snow beneath my boots muffled my steps, and I moved as quietly as I could, every nerve in my body taut with anticipation. As I drew closer, muffled voices reached my ears. I crept around the side of the cabin, stopping beneath a window where the curtain didn't fully meet the frame. I stood there, breathless and still. As I looked inside, the room was small, the firelight casting flickering shadows across the wooden walls. A single couch sat near the hearth, and beside it stood Chase's back to the window as he poured 2 glasses of wine. And then, from the doorway, Dakota appeared. She smiled at him, that smile. The one she used to give me when we first fell in love. The smile I hadn't seen in months. Chase handed her a glass, his fingers brushing hers, and she laughed softly, softer than I'd heard her laugh in years. They clinked their glasses, their gazes locked in a way that needed no words. I couldn't look away, even though I wanted to, even though it felt like the air had been ripped from my lungs. I stood there, frozen in place, as the truth unfolded before my eyes. And in that moment, something inside me broke. I stood outside the cabin, my breath coming in shallow bursts as the scene inside unfolded like a nightmare I couldn't escape. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out the faint crackle of the fire and the muffled hum of their voices. Dakota stood close to Chase, her smile soft, her posture relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. She took a sip of wine, her gaze lingering on him as if nothing else in the world existed. Every second that passed chipped away at the foundation of everything I thought we had. I should have walked away. I should have gone back to the girls, packed up our things, and left without a word. But I couldn't move, not until I knew the full truth. Chase leaned in, brushing a strand of hair from Dakota's face, and she tilted her head toward his touch, welcoming it. I clenched my fists at my sides, my breath misting against the cold glass. Are you sure about tonight? Chase asked, his voice low but clear through the thin window. Dakota smiled a smile that used to belong to me. I've never been more sure. My stomach twisted into knots as Chase leaned down, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that sent a sharp jolt through my chest. I should have looked away, but I couldn't, not when Dakota wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer with a familiarity that shattered any last shred of doubt I had. This wasn't a fleeting mistake, this was a choice point, one she had made over and over again. That I stumbled back from the window, my breath ragged as I clutched a tree trunk for support. The cold air bit at my skin, but it couldn't numb the ache that had settled deep in my chest. That I wanted to storm inside and tear them apart, to demand answers, to make them feel the pain that was ripping me apart from the inside out, but I couldn't, not yet. That I needed to think of Emma and Lily. I couldn't afford to lose control, not here, not now. So I turned and walked back through the snow, each step heavy with the weight of what I had just witnessed. The path back to the main cabin stretched before me like an endless expanse of white, each crunch of snow beneath my boots echoing in the silence. My thoughts swirled in a storm of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak. How long had this been going on? How many nights had she left our daughters sleeping upstairs while she slipped away to meet him? I clenched my jaw, shoving my hands into my coat pockets to keep them from shaking. The cold air burned in my lungs, but I kept moving, one step at a time, until the lights of our cabin came into view. I paused at the door, my hand resting on the handle as I took a shaky breath. Inside, Emma and Lily were fast asleep, innocent and unaware of the storm that was about to tear their world apart. That I couldn't confront Dakota tonight, not with the girls here, but tomorrow, she would have no place to hide. That I stood in the doorway, the cold clinging to my skin as I listened to the soft breaths of my daughters sleeping upstairs. Their innocence was the only thing holding me together. Dakota wouldn't be back for hours. I knew that now. My fists clenched at my sides as the memory of her kiss with Chase burned behind my eyes, but tonight, I wouldn't confront her. Tonight, I would wait, because tomorrow, she would have to face the truth. Morning arrived with the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the snow-covered trees. I stood in the kitchen, gripping my coffee mug as I listened to the faint sounds of my daughters waking upstairs. The front door creaked open, and Dakota stepped inside, brushing snow from her coat. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the air between us felt heavy with everything unsaid. Early morning ski, she said casually, avoiding my gaze. That I forced a smile, the weight of last night pressing against my chest. You missed breakfast. She hesitated, sensing the tension beneath my words. But instead of addressing it, she simply nodded and walked past me toward the stairs. As I watched her disappear down the hallway, my fists clenched at my sides. The clock was ticking, and soon, she would have nowhere left to hide. That I stood motionless in the kitchen, the air thick with the tension that hung between Dakota and me like an invisible thread stretched to its limit. The faint sound of her footsteps faded down the hall as she retreated to the bedroom, leaving behind the faint scent of snow and pine clinging to her coat. That I clenched the coffee mug in my hands, the ceramic warm against my skin but doing nothing to thaw the icy knot in my chest. How could she walk through the door like nothing had happened? Like she hadn't spent the night in another man's arms? My thoughts swirled, replaying the scene from the cabin, the stolen kiss, the warmth in her eyes that she no longer reserved for me, the casual way she touched Chase as if he belonged to her. I wanted answers. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to tear away the veil of lies she'd woven around our family, but not yet. The girls' laughter drifted down the stairs, reminder of the fragile world that still existed beyond my shattered heart. For their sake, I had to hold it together. At least for now. The day passed in a blur of half-smiles and hollow conversations. I took the girls sledding near the lodge, their laughter echoing through the snow-covered hills. Dakota joined us, her laughter ringing out as she helped Emma and Lily build a snowman. From the outside, we must have looked like the perfect family, husband and wife, 2 daughters, a winter vacation straight out of a postcard. But beneath the surface, I could feel the cracks widening with every passing moment. Dakota's gaze flicked toward the ski lifts more than once, her smile faltering whenever her phone buzzed in her pocket. That I noticed the way her fingers tensed around the device, the way she turned slightly away whenever she checked the screen, as if shielding the messages from view. She thought she was being careful, but I saw everything. By mid-afternoon, the girls were tired from sledding and begged to return to the cabin. I carried Lily in my arms, her head resting against my shoulder as she dozed off, while Emma trudged beside me, holding tightly to my hand. Dakota followed a few steps behind, her phone clutched tightly in her hand as she typed out a quick message. I didn't ask who she was texting. That I already knew. After settling the girls into bed for their afternoon nap, I found Dakota standing by the window in the living room, staring out at the snow-covered slopes beyond the trees. Her reflection in the glass was distant, her shoulders tense as if she could feel the weight of my gaze. "We need to talk," I said, stepping closer. She turned, her smile slipping away as she met my eyes. "What's wrong?" I took a breath, the words heavy on my tongue. "You've been distant this whole trip. Sneaking off, spending more time alone than with us. I need to know what's going on." Her lips parted, but no words came. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes, quick and fleeting, before she masked it with a forced smile. "I just needed some space, Grant," she said, her voice soft but guarded. "This trip was supposed to be a break, for all of us. I've been feeling trapped lately. I needed time to clear my head." I stepped closer, searching her face for the truth beneath the carefully chosen words. "And Chase? Is he helping you clear your head?" The color drained from her cheeks, her eyes widening in shock. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me, Dakota," I said, my voice low but firm. "I saw the messages. I know about the cabin." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, the mask slipped, the guilt and fear laid bare in her eyes. But just as quickly, she recovered, straightening her shoulders as her gaze hardened. "You had no right to go through my phone," she snapped, "and you had no right to cheat on me," I shot back, my voice rising despite myself. She flinched as if I'd struck her, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice wavering between anger and desperation. "Chase and I, it's complicated." "No," I said, stepping closer until only a breath of space separated us. "It's not complicated. You made a choice. A choice to betray me. To betray our family." Tears welled in her eyes, but whether they were from guilt, regret, or fear of being caught, I couldn't tell. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "But it did," I said, my voice cold and final. Silence stretched between us, heavy with all the words we couldn't say, and in that moment, I knew there was no going back. That night, as Dakota slept beside me, her breathing slow and steady, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. There was still more to uncover. More truths that needed to come to light before I could make my final decision, because this wasn't just about me, this was about Emma and Lily, the family we had built, the future I had sworn to protect, and tomorrow, I would confront the final thread that held Dakota's lies together. No more pretending, no more waiting. Tomorrow, the truth would come out no matter the cost. The next morning, I woke to the faint hum of the heater and the distant sound of snow falling softly against the cabin roof. The bed beside me was cold. Dakota had already slipped out, leaving nothing but the faint scent of her perfume on the pillow. I sat up, running a hand through my hair as the weight of last night pressed heavy against my chest. The confrontation had opened cracks in the foundation of our marriage, but the truth still felt just out of reach. Today, I would find it. By midday, the girls were bundled up in their coats, racing through the snow outside the cabin. Their laughter echoed through the trees as they chased each other with snowballs, their innocence a stark contrast to the storm raging beneath the surface of my world. I stood by the window, sipping coffee as I watched them play. Dakota stood nearby, her phone in hand as she typed out a quick message, her eyes flicking toward the distant slopes with a look I knew all too well. She thought I hadn't noticed, but I had. Her stolen glances, the way her smile faltered when she thought no one was looking each moment, added another layer to the growing knot of suspicion tightening in my chest. When she glanced at her phone again, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips, I set my coffee down and stepped outside. "Everything okay?" I asked casually, pulling my coat tighter against the cold. Dakota slipped her phone into her pocket, her smile quick and forced. "Yeah. Just checking the time. Thought I might hit the slopes this afternoon." "Alone?" She hesitated, her gaze flicking away. "Yeah. I just need a little space, you know. Clear my head." I nodded slowly, the tension between us thick as the air before a storm. "I'll take the girls sledding near the lodge," I said, forcing a smile. "You go, clear your head." She held my gaze for a moment, something unreadable flickering in her eyes before she turned away. An hour later, the girls and I stood at the edge of the sledding hill near the lodge. Emma and Lily giggled as they raced down the slope, their laughter carrying through the crisp air. But my focus was elsewhere. I scanned the slopes beyond the sledding hill, searching for any sign of Dakota among the skiers weaving down the mountainside. My heart pounded as my gaze landed on a familiar figure, her red coat a vivid streak against the white snow as she moved toward the far lifts that led to the western slopes. I waited until she disappeared from view, then called Emma and Lily back to the top of the hill. "Hey, girls," I said, crouching down beside them. "How about we head inside for some hot cocoa?" Their cheers of excitement made me smile despite the storm raging inside me. I led them to the lodge, settling them at a table near the fireplace with steaming mugs of cocoa and a plate of cookies. "Stay right here, okay?" I said, crouching down to meet their eyes. "Daddy has to check something, but I'll be right back." Emma's brow furrowed. "Where are you going?" "Just upstairs for a minute." "Stay where I can see you, all right?" They nodded, and I pressed a kiss to each of their heads before turning toward the back entrance of the lodge. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I moved swiftly through the trees, following the trail Dakota had taken toward the western slopes. My breath misted in the air, each step driving me closer to the truth I no longer wanted to deny. As I neared the edge of the forest, my heart pounded harder. The distant hum of the ski lifts echoed through the air, but my focus was locked on the narrow trail that led deeper into the woods, the same trail I had followed the night before. I pushed forward, branches brushing against my coat as I moved deeper into the forest. The snow beneath my boots was freshly disturbed, marked by the tracks of two people moving side by side. I followed the tracks until the trees thinned, revealing a small cabin nestled among the pines. Smoke curled from the chimney, the faint flicker of firelight visible through the frosted windows. I approached slowly, my breath ragged with anticipation and dread. The snow muffled my steps as I circled to the side of the cabin, where the curtain hung slightly open. My pulse thundered in my ears as I leaned closer, peering through the narrow gap in the window. Inside, Dakota sat on the couch beside Chase, her hands resting in her lap as she leaned toward him, her smile soft and familiar in a way that made my chest ache. Chase reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear as his fingers brushed her cheek. She tilted her head toward his touch, her eyes meeting his with a look of longing that cut deeper than any blade. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat as I clenched my fists at my sides. There was no more doubt and no more questions. The truth stood before me, undeniable and unforgiving, and this time, I wouldn't walk away. I stood outside the cabin, my breath misting in the icy air as snowflakes clung to my coat. Inside, Dakota and Chase sat close, their laughter muffled by the walls that now held the final proof of her betrayal. I should have turned away. I should have walked back to my daughters and ended this quietly, but I couldn't. I needed to see it to feel it. Pressing closer to the frosted glass, I watched as Chase reached for her hand, his fingers curling around hers with an intimacy that shattered what little hope I had left. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, his voice low but clear. Through the thin walls, Dakota smiled, the kind of smile she hadn't given me in months. "Me too," she whispered. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat as the weight of her words crashed over me. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out the sounds of the world around me. It was over, whatever thread of hope I'd been holding onto it was gone. I stood motionless, snow falling softly around me as the warmth from the cabin seeped through the glass. Dakota's laughter, muffled but unmistakable, twisted like a knife in my chest. Every moment played out in slow motion. Chase's hand brushing her cheek, her fingers tracing his wrist, their smiles meant only for each other. I wanted to burst through the door, to confront them both and shatter their illusion of secrecy, but I didn't, not because I lacked the courage but because I'd already seen enough. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about acceptance. I turned and walked away, each step crunching against the snow as I left the cabin and Dakota behind me. The cold air bit at my skin, but the ache inside my chest hurt far worse. Yet with every step, the weight began to lift, because this time, I wasn't walking away broken. I was walking towards something else. Freedom. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I moved through the woods, each step taking me farther from the cabin and from her. The air was sharp, biting at my lungs with every breath, but I welcomed the cold. It grounded me, kept me focused as my mind replayed what I'd seen through that window. Dakota's smile, her fingers intertwined with his, the warmth in her eyes that once belonged to me, the pain clung to my chest like ice, heavy and unyielding. But beneath it was something else, clarity that I couldn't change what she'd done, but I could control what happened next. As the lights of our cabin came into view, my footsteps slowed. Inside, Emma and Lily would be waiting, innocent and unaware of how their world was about to change. I paused at the door, taking a long, steady breath as I gripped the handle. This wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of something new, and this time, I wouldn't look back. I stepped into the cabin, closing the door softly behind me. The warmth inside wrapped around me, but it did nothing to thaw the cold ache in my chest. Emma and Lily sat by the fireplace, their cheeks rosy from the cold, laughter spilling from their lips as they played with a set of wooden blocks. Their innocence was a stark contrast to the storm brewing beneath the surface of our family. I knelt beside them, forcing a smile. "Having fun, girls?" Lily beamed up at me. "Look, Daddy. We made a castle." "It's perfect," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Emma tilted her head, studying me with wide, curious eyes. "Daddy, are you okay?" For a moment, my throat tightened. I wanted to shield them from the truth, to preserve this fleeting moment of happiness, but I couldn't lie. "Yeah, sweetheart," I said softly. "Daddy's just thinking." Their laughter resumed as I stood and made my way to the kitchen, my pulse quickening as I heard the distant crunch of snow outside, the sound of Dakota's footsteps approaching. This time, I wouldn't wait. This time, she would have to face the truth. The front door creaked open, and Dakota stepped inside, brushing snow from her coat. Her gaze flicked toward me, and for a moment, her smile faltered just enough for me to see the guilt hiding beneath her carefully composed mask. "Hey," she said, her tone light but cautious. "Did the girls have fun sledding?" "They did," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "But we need to talk." Her fingers stilled against her coat buttons, her eyes darting toward the girls by the fireplace. "Now?" "Yes." I motioned toward the hallway, and after a hesitation that felt like a lifetime, she followed me into the bedroom. I closed the door behind us, the faint crackle of the fire muffled by the walls. Dakota stood near the window, her hands gripping the back of a chair as if bracing herself. "What's this about, Grant?" I stepped closer, my pulse steady but heavy with the weight of what I had to say. "I know." Her knuckles whitened against the wood. "Know what?" "Don't do that," I said, my voice low but firm. "Don't lie. I saw you. I saw you with Chase at the cabin." Her breath caught in her throat, eyes wide as she spun to face me. "Grant, no more excuses. No more sneaking around. I want the truth. How long has this been going on?" Silence. Then, finally, her shoulders sagged, and the mask slipped. "Since the fall," she whispered. I swallowed hard, the confirmation still hitting like a punch to the chest even though I'd known the truth all along. "Why?" I asked, my voice rough with the weight of the question. "Why would you do this to us? To the girls?" Tears welled in her eyes, but whether they were from guilt or regret, I couldn't tell. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice trembling. "I was lost. I needed to feel something again. And you couldn't talk to me?" "I tried, Grant," she said, her voice rising with frustration. "But you were always so focused on work, on providing for us. I felt invisible." I stepped closer, anger and heartbreak clashing inside me. "So instead of fixing what we had, you threw it all away for him?" Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer, because we both knew the truth and there was no going back now. Silence stretched between us, thick with all the words that had been left unsaid for too long. Dakota's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she clutched the back of the chair like it was the only thing keeping her standing. I stood still, my breath slow and deliberate as I absorbed the final blow of her confession. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "Then why did you?" I asked, my voice rough but steady. I don't know," she said, shaking her head. It wasn't supposed to happen. Chase was just he made me feel alive again. I felt like me again. I swallowed hard. And I didn't? Her silence answered for her. I ran a hand through my hair, my chest tightening with the weight of it all. I loved you, Dakota. I gave you everything I had. Our daughters, they deserve better than this. I know, she choked out. I know I messed up. But, Grant, can't we find a way to fix this? For the girls? Her plea hung in the air, but the answer was already clear in my heart. I shook my head slowly. Some things can't be fixed. Her face crumpled as the truth settled between us. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but I stood firm, the last of my resolve solidifying inside me. I'll take the girls home tomorrow, I said, my voice steady now. When we get back, I'll contact a lawyer. We'll figure out what's best for them. But this, I gestured between us, this is over. Grant, please, no, I interrupted, my voice soft but firm. You made your choice. And now, I'm making mine. Her shoulders sagged as the finality of my words settled into the air like snow falling softly over broken ground. Without another word, I turned and stepped out of the room, leaving behind the woman I had once loved and the life we could no longer share. Morning arrived with a pale gray sky and the faint hum of snow falling against the windows. The air inside the cabin felt heavier than ever, filled with the echoes of words that could never be taken back. I stood by the door, the girls' suitcases packed and ready beside me. Emma clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, her wide eyes flicking between Dakota and me. Lily clung to my leg, sensing the tension even if she couldn't understand it. Dakota stood near the fireplace, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater as she watched us with tear-streaked cheeks. Do we have to leave today? Emma asked softly, her voice uncertain. I crouched down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Yeah, sweetheart. It's time to go home. Is Mommy coming too? My throat tightened, but I forced a gentle smile. Not this time, baby. But you'll see her soon, okay? Emma's brow furrowed, but she nodded, trusting my words. I stood, meeting Dakota's gaze one last time. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Without another word, I opened the door, guiding the girls outside into the snow. The cold air bit at my skin, but the weight inside my chest felt lighter with each step toward the car. I buckled the girls into their seats, pausing to brush a tear from Lily's cheek as she clung to her rabbit. As I closed the door and stepped into the driver's seat, I glanced back at the cabin one last time. Dakota stood in the doorway, her figure small against the backdrop of snow-covered trees. Our eyes met across the distance. One final moment of understanding, regret, and acceptance. Then I turned the key, the engine rumbling to life beneath my hands, and without looking back, I drove away because some chapters aren't meant to last forever, and this time, I was ready to start a new one for myself and for my daughters.